This is a PowerPoint about equivalent fractions and comparing fractions, and it will help you with pages 17, 18, 19, 21, 22 and 23 of the fractions worksheet that is in the Level 1 pack. So let's look at equivalent fractions first of all. So this is pages 17 and 18 of the booklet. The same fraction can be written in lots of different ways. The half is the same as 2 quarters, which is the same as 3/6, which is the same as 5/10, which is the same as 345 over 690. You can test whether they're equivalent by turning each one into a divide sum. And if you need a reminder about how to do that, there is a separate PowerPoint about it. But basically you divide the top number by the bottom number. And if you do that for each of these fractions, you'll find that the answer is 0.5 for each one. So that's how you know they all represent a half. You can create equivalent fractions by multiplying or dividing. The rule is that whatever you do to the top number, you also have to do to the bottom number. Let's take 9 over 15 as an example. Let's multiply that first of all. So we can choose any number we want to multiply. In this case, let's do times 4. So because we've times 9 by 4, whatever we do to the top number, we have to do to the bottom number. So we also times 15 by 4. And that gives us a fraction that is 36 over 60. 9 times 4 is 36, 15 times 4 is 60, so that's how we get that fraction. What we can also do is divide those numbers, but in this case we can't just choose any number. We have to choose a number that both those numbers, 9 and 15, divide into without leaving any remainders. So let's choose 3. So we'll divide 9 by 3 and we'll divide 15 by 3. And that gives us 3 over 5. When we can't divide a fraction anymore, we call this its simplest form. So if you look at 3 over 5, there's no number that you can divide 3 by and 5 by to get a whole number answer. So that's how we know that that fraction is now in its simplest form. So this exercise I'm about to give you will help you with the questions on page 19 of the booklet. So I want you to turn each of these fractions into its simplest form. So for each fraction, you need to find a number that both the top number and the bottom number divide by without leaving any remainders. So pause the slide at this point and have a go at finding the simplest form for each of these fractions. So we'll have a look at the answers. So 4/8 becomes a half. 6 over 18 becomes a third. 8 over 12 becomes 2/3. 21 over 28 becomes 3/4, and 12 over 48 becomes 1/4. So tick the ones you've got right, and if you've got any wrong, just have a think about why you might have got them wrong, and then have a go at page 19 of the booklet. So these slides relate to pages 21 and 23 of the booklet, and I'm just going to give you a quick note on comparisons. So an arrow pointing forward and an arrow pointing backwards mean greater than and less than. The arrow always points towards the smaller number. So some examples. This is telling us that 5 is greater than 3. This means 2 is less than 7. And this means that 1/7 is less than 1/3. And you can also sometimes have equals between things as well. So let's have a look at comparing fractions. There are different ways of comparing fractions. One way is to turn the fractions into decimals and then compare the decimals. So here we've got 2/5, and that equals 0.4 as a decimal, because 2 divided by 5 is 0.4. Here we've got 3/8, and as a decimal, that is 0.375, because 3 divided by 8 gives you 0.375. So from this, you can see that 2/5 is greater than 3/8. So that's one way to do it. And that's a way that you can use for pages 21 and 23 of the booklet. You can also use a chart that looks like this. So this will help you with pages 21, 22 and 23 of the booklet. So you can see here the relative sizes of each fraction. So you can see how we go from the whole one on the top through halves, thirds, quarters, all the way down to twelfths. And you can see that as the number on the bottom of the fraction gets bigger, so the fraction itself gets smaller. You can use this chart to compare fractions. So for example, let's look at the thirds line. Let's look at 2/3 and try and find what that is the equivalent of. And to do that, you draw a line at the end of 2/3, and then you see where that line meets as you go down the rows. So if you have a look down the arrow, you can see that 2/3 finishes at the same point as 4/6, and that finishes at the same point as 8/12 down at the bottom. So that's how you compare different amount of fractions using a chart like this. The third way is to make the bottom number of the fraction the same and then compare the top number. So this is a method that you can use for pages 21 and 23 of the booklet. So which is bigger? 1/4 or 2/5? So we're going to use this third way to compare these fractions. Well, what we're going to do is make the bottom number of the fractions the same. And the easiest way to do that is to multiply the bottom number of each fraction by the bottom number of the other fraction. So in this case, we're going to look at the quarter, and we're going to multiply that 4 by the bottom number of the other fraction. So we're going to do 4 times 5. And then on the 2/5, we're going to multiply the 5 by the bottom number of the other fraction, which is 4. So we're going to do 5 times 4. So in each case, that gives us something over 20. Now the rule is, whatever you do to the bottom number of the fraction, you have to do to the top number as well. So on that quarter on the left, we've multiplied 4 by 5, so we have to times 1 by 5 as well. And on the other side, the 2/5, we've multiplied the bottom by 4, so we multiply the top by 4. And so now that gives us the new fractions of 5 over 20 and 8 over 20. So comparing those two fractions, you can see that 8 over 20 is greater than 5 over 20. So 2/5 is greater than 1/4. So I'd like you to have a quick practice at doing this sort of question. For each pair of fractions, I want you to decide which is bigger. So which is bigger between 1/3 and 2/5? Which is bigger between 3/5 and 4/7? Which is bigger between 3/7 and 2/3? Between 7/9 and 3/4? And between 5/11 and 7/12? So pause the slide now and have a go at deciding which is bigger out of each pair of fractions. So let's have a look at the answers. So you'll see a tick appear next to the bigger fraction in each pairs. So check your own answers. Make sure you got it right. And if you didn't get it right, just have another look and see if you can see where you went wrong.